right field. Double start for Stewart. He comes up. It's close to deep left field by Alvarez, and that's going to win 4 straight games for the second time in his. He's home.
What's up, everyone, and welcome back to the True Mets Talk podcast. Today is a special show. It is the first time that we are ever going live on the True Mets Talk podcast. You've seen me on the Mets Hot Stove Live. You've seen me on our Fridays and Tuesdays on the Interstate Mets Report, but this is the very first time on the True Mets Talk podcast that we're going live. Before we get into anything, make sure you hit that thumbs up, hit that subscribe button on the channel, and hit the live chat in the comments section. Let us know what you think. We'll be answering questions throughout the show. And I'm really excited to have my guy, Dan Bartels, on. Dan, thank you so much for making this happen, joining the live stream, joining the show. I'm excited to talk some Mets baseball with you. For those of y'all that don't know, you can find Dan on X and Instagram at the handles down below, also in the description down below. Make sure you go check him out. Some awesome Mets content coming out of you. Let the channel know what you're doing, what you're about, what kind of content you create, and where they can find you, Dan.
Chris, thank you for first off having me on. I mean, I've loved your content for a while now. That's why I reached out to you, buddy, because I really do think you do a really good job. So I'm very excited to get into a lot of the Mets right now. A lot's going on, whether we like to admit it or not. There is a lot going on behind the scenes. Just about me, I'm a student at Fordham University. I'm a senior now, play-by-play broadcaster with baseball, a little bit with basketball. More baseball is my, avenue. I'm a beat reporter as well through the radio, WFUV Sports. We try to live up to the lineage of Vince Scully. That's the guy we all look up to at Fordham, and specifically, that's someone I'm, always try to look up to as well. So that's just a little bit about me. I'm a diehard Mets fan from Long Island, the whole nine. So, I got that good background. But again, I'm very excited to talk some Mets with you, man, for sure.
Yeah, absolutely. I thank you so much for the kind words and definitely want to make this happen. So I'm definitely glad that we can make this happen tonight. Like you said, a lot of Mets talk going on, a lot of discussions going on. So make sure you all are paying attention, are in tune with everything that Dan's doing on his social media accounts. And like I said, just show him some love and follow those handles down below on X and Instagram. And we got already so many comments in here. Got to shout people out. Carlos Ramos tuning in. We got Ethan tuning in. We got That's My Sports tuning in. Mason, shout out Mason. What up, Mason? John's tuning in here. We got Ibby from the Till Mets Do Us Part tuning in. Is this the Drew Gilbert Stan channel now? Absolutely. You already know what it is. Yeah, absolutely. Stoney says, breaking news, Mets heavy interest in Soler. We'll definitely go ahead and get into that, Stoney. We got Yuki also tuning into the chat. But before we get into anything in terms of current Mets news, we do have to start this episode out on a little bit more of a somber note. Today, the New York Mets announcing the passing of Mets all-time great Met, Bud Harrelson. You can see Bud's accolades on the screen here. Rest in peace, first and foremost, to Bud. And Dan, I know you have a couple words to say here as well, but 13-year career with the New York Mets as a player, the first and only Met world champion in both 1969 1986. Obviously was a coach, the third base coach on that 1986 team. Won a Gold Glove in 1971 and an All-Star in both 1970 1971. Just very sad news to start our day off here. So definitely wanted to pay tribute and pay homage. And Dan, if you got a couple words to say as well, definitely feel free to.
Well, it's hard to talk about Mets history without talking about Buddy Harrelson. I think he was someone that a lot of players, Howie Rose got on the fan today. He was talking about how just his relationship with Buddy Harrelson, it felt like everyone always knew who Buddy was. He was so accessible. He always, charities. He was always very, giving to the community around him. And I think that's something that a lot of people overpass, especially in today's game, right? A lot of people turn a blind eye to that. Buddy Harrelson was a really good player. We always highlight the Pete Rose scuffle that he had, right? I mean, obviously that's a big thing. And that's something that will obviously be always attached to him. But I think at the same time, who he was as a player, he was one of the best infielders in Mets history too. I think we can't ignore that. So, and being from Long Island, I lived in Smithtown, but Hauppauge was the town over. I went to Hauppauge Middle School. He grew up he had a house in Hauppauge, so I never met him formally. I can say that. But again, what he meant to the people surrounding it, and also the Long Island Ducks. He was a co-founder of the Long Island Ducks. He brought professional baseball to Long Island. I think there's something to be said for that as well. So Buddy Harrelson, rest in peace. His battle with Alzheimer's affects a lot of people. It's a really crippling disease too that people, there's not enough awareness about it a lot of the time. So Buddy Harrelson, one of the best players, 1971 Gold Glove, 1969 World Series champion, and again in '86 wore the uniform as a manager too. So much respect to Buddy Harrelson, and rest in peace.
Yeah, absolutely. Rest in peace. Definitely wanted to. It didn't feel right starting the show off not paying tribute to Buddy Harrelson. Will definitely be missed. And I was definitely checking out Gary Cohen giving some thoughts on Buddy Harrelson on SNY earlier today. A lot of people around the Mets community chiming in as well and giving their thoughts and prayers to his family and just paying tribute. So Stoney also saying RIP to Buddy Harrelson as well. And absolutely good to hear that unique aspect side of those Long Island roots. Dan, as well as relation to Buddy Harrelson. Moving on here a little bit, getting into some current Mets baseball news here. We got the hot topic we wanted to start off here in terms of Pete Alonso and the sort of situation the Mets are finding themselves in with a potential contract extension. Obviously, the latest report per Will Salmon of The Athletic is that the Mets have not discussed an extension with Pete Alonso at all this entire offseason. We heard something similar. Well, not similar, but Mark Feinstein reported back in early September that the Mets did make a preliminary offer, but they were very far apart on the number. So all things indicating to an extension, perhaps maybe not being reached by season start, although a lot of things can happen between now and opening day. Arbitration values are still going to be having to be worked out. Obviously, I know you're very in tune with the arbitration situation going on with all the New York Mets players, especially Pete Alonso. So let me know what you think, Dan. I'm very curious because we haven't talked about this before. I haven't got your thoughts on the whole Pete Alonso situation. Mets fans in the comments section, whoever tunes into all of our Mets shows are definitely it's definitely a hot commodity topic, right? People want to know what's going on with Pete Alonso and where we as Mets content creators stand with Pete Alonso. So definitely want to get your thoughts here. And you see Alonso's career numbers with the New York Mets, 5 years with the Mets so far, and the numbers speak for themselves, especially in the power category. So let the viewers know at home what you think about this whole Pete Alonso situation.
Well, to start, 5 years of service time so far for Pete Alonso, and he has not reached arbitration yet. I don't think that's a bad thing. I think we can go on the record and say that that's fine. We can let him go into the season, go into February, and decide their own numbers, because with Scott Boras as his agent now, and people forget this too, Nimmo had Boras as his agent, right? And Nimmo re-signed with the Mets. So I think Boras isn't as much of a villain as a lot of people want to really make him out to be. He just wants the top dollar for his guys, and that's perfectly respectable. I understand that. A lot of people are going to compare him to what does he want in a contract, right? You look to Freddie Freeman, 6 years, $162 million. That AAV is $27 million a year. So are we on the record in saying that Pete Alonso should be paid more than Freddie Freeman? Well, we have to ask ourselves the question, when did Freddie Freeman get paid? His age 32 season. Pete Alonso is 29 going on 30. So I don't think it's out of the realm of possibility to sit here and say that he can get a higher AAV than Freeman. $29 million a year for 7 years or whatever that puts you at, $203 million. I don't know the exact numbers off the top of my head, but I don't think that's out of the realm of possibility. And as a Mets fan, this front office has to realize Steve Cohen is a Mets fan. Okay. David Stearns is a Mets fan. They understand that these guys don't come around very often. 40 home runs a year, kind of with ease at this point, I think we can say. So, those guys are not going to come. And, David Wright was the guy when we were growing up that we thought would be a Met for life. And he was, but obviously injuries, more recently DeGrom, and obviously we kind of lucked out on the side of that, I think, in terms of what,
Right,
Texas
absolutely.
has to do with. So, and Darryl Strawberry, you go back 2 generations, that's kind of what they were dealing with. So, and he walked too. So again, I'm not so worried. I think Pete Alonso, we know what he's going to be. I'm going to go on the record and say 500 home runs. I think 400 is his kind of floor. But 500 home runs, enshrine him in Cooperstown. He'll be a Met for life. I really do think that. And the front office would be kind of idiotic, should I say, if they're really going to, trade him away. For what? At the end of the day, what? You look at those trade options, Vlad Guerrero, that's just swapping a 1A with a 1A. It's not really making us better. So again, Pete Alonso has to stay a Met. No doubt in my mind. We saw his defensive, too, on the other side of the ball kind of improve as he's gotten a lot older. And that's something that we kind of have to, put a fine line on. And I really do think that at the end of the day, Pete Alonso should be a Met for life, and his numbers have attested to it. And I really do think that that's going to happen.
Yeah, absolutely. I completely agree with you at face value. Like Pete Alonso, one of my favorite players, and I try not to let my sort of subjectivity get in the way of my objectivity when talking about Pete Alonso. And just
Mhm.
before I get my thoughts in there, Patty's checking into the stream, agreeing with you as well. We got Stevie Mack in the house as well. Stoney's saying he thinks Pete will be a Met next free
Yeah.
agency. And then here we go. We got Carlos saying there was a huge difference between Straw and Pete. Just saying,
Right.
absolutely, and yeah, and you can take that comment if you want, but just before that, I like exactly what you said, and this is what I've been stressing for the most part this offseason in terms of Pete Alonso numbers. I projected him for 8 years, 240 million from the start. That's right at 30 million AAV. And the reason I do that is above all else, right? Contracts inflate. We all know that.
Yeah.
But when a lot of people talk about, like you said, Freddie Freeman making $27 million a year, Matt Olson on the lower level of that making $21 million a year or whatever it is, either 21 or 23. I think it's 21 though. Don't quote me on
Mhm.
that. Making that with the Braves. He took a team-friendly deal with the Braves. That's not feasible. And like you said of Freddie Freeman, this guy was 32 years old when he signed with the Dodgers. Now, my objectivity is not going to get in the way here. Freddie Freeman is light years better than Pete Alonso. But if we are expecting to sort of use those players as metrics for a Pete Alonso extension, then it's never going to happen. And I will let you take the rest of that in terms of
Right.
what Carlos is saying here.
In terms of what he's saying, I think there's something to be said about a homegrown guy. We understand what Straw was, no doubt in my mind. He was one of the smoothest swinging, best prospects I think that we've ever seen. I get all of that. But at the same time, you have to ask yourself, if you want to build a culture in New York, okay, you want to build something that's sustainable, right? David Stearns talks about all the time. They want to build sustainable culture. I think that's a big thing. We look across to the Dodgers. We want to be the Dodgers, right? I get all that. That doesn't happen overnight. That you have to sign these guys. You know, Nimmo got his money. McNeil got his money. Lindor got his money. Alonso's sitting there saying, all right, when do I get paid? And you know, Stearns is kind of he's been on multiple shows. I know you've seen them, I've seen them as well, where he's saying we want to do this behind closed doors. There's other fish they have to fry. You know, there's a bullpen that needs addressing. There's other things that have to go behind the scenes. You know, 8 years, 240, that's not a bad price either. But again, you have to ask yourself the question. We're in New York. He's going to compare himself to other players, right? Especially in arbitration. That's what they're doing right now. Aaron Judge, if he's going to sit there and compare himself to Aaron Judge, who got 9 years, 360 million with a 40 million AAV, you're in big trouble. You are in big trouble, my friend, because that is not going to be sustainable. So again, we have to be realistic. We have to understand what he is. The average is not always going to be there, but the power numbers are. So you need someone like a DH. We'll get on to it later in the show about a DH, how we need a guy to back up Alonso because of that exact issue. You know, the average is not always going to be there. So again, I get he's not Darryl Strawberry. I'm well aware. But again, at the end of the day, if you want to build a culture, it starts with Pete Alonso.
Absolutely. I mean, I can't speak truer words. I'm definitely, liking exactly what you're saying. This has been a tune that I've been saying every single segment about Pete Alonso. And I've kind of shied away from the Pete Alonso talk just because there's other fish to fry within this organization, like you said. But Pete Alonso definitely needs to be talked about. Listen, he's a career 250 plus hitter, right? We understand that he batted 217, but when you take a look at the grand scale of things and his sample size in terms of the average, as strictly as averages go, for a power hitter, I'll take that all day long from what he displayed, right? 217 is going to happen. Do I think he's on a trajectory of a Kyle Schwarber? No, absolutely not. But like you said, there's two sides of the fence, right? Everyone wants Pete Alonso, and we all need to be realistic about Pete Alonso. Listen, $30 million a year for Pete Alonso, making the highest paid first baseman in the game, is definitely realistic. Is Pete Alonso going to be realistic, like you said? That's the question. Is Scott Boras, who's representing him, going to be realistic? These are all questions that have to sort of cross the minds of us fans when we're talking about this objectively. And I think that all those factors go over some people's heads. They definitely do. But you'd be surprised how many Mets fans, when they see a figure like 32 and a half, 33 million, like Spotrac is projecting him at, and I talked about that, a couple segments ago on the channel, that they would be like, let's do it in an instant with a snap of the finger. Let's do it. People love Pete Alonso, man.
Mm-hmm.
It's something where like you take him away from the organization, whether it's via trade or just letting him walk simply outright in free agency next year. And that's a PR mess because fans like Steve Cohen has a Twitter account. I know David Stearns doesn't, as far as I know. I don't know any burner David Stearns Twitter accounts, but Steve Cohen's on there and he feels that pressure. And I know that a lot of people like to say, oh, he's the owner. He's not paying attention to what fans think. Like, he's on here for a reason. He's on here for a reason. He's on social media for a reason. So, like I said, there's always two sides of the fence here, and it gets a little bit murky because a lot of people get very defensive when it comes to Pete Alonso, and rightfully so. He's on a trajectory of being an all-time great Met, a Hall of Famer with the New York Mets. I understand all those things, but both sides, this is why it's called negotiation, right? Pete Alonso and Scott Boras are going to come at the high road. And then you got to have David Stearns to talk him down a little bit. Is he going to be the highest paid first baseman? Yes, because if it's not with the Mets, it's going to be with somebody else.
Yeah.
Whether it's the Cubs, whether it's the Giants, somebody's going to give him more than $27 million that Freddie Freeman's getting. Would you agree with that notion?
Absolutely. And I think there's something to be said too about how he loves New York. He's embraced New York. I think as Mets fans, we've kind of grown with the 217. We kind of have come to the realization like, okay, that's our guy. That's fine. We can live with that. We can live with the 40 home runs and the 217 average. I think where it comes down to is just understanding that these teams need first basemen too. I understand that. But at the same time, he's our guy. That's the only way I could put it at the end of the day. He's our guy. And the Mets fans know that. The Mets organization knows that, definitely. I mean, David Stearns understands. He is in full confidence that Pete Alonso is going to be our starting first baseman. And I think he will be at the end of the day. Whether he tests free agency or not, fine. Let him at the end of the day, because that's why he hired Scott Boras this offseason. But at the end of the day, that's what it's going to be. He's going to be our first baseman. I'm going to say that until I'm blue in the face personally. But that's really what I think and what I believe.
Yeah, absolutely. And I'm right there with you guys. We got 28 people going on 30 people kind of floating in the chat. Make sure you hit that thumbs up, subscribe to the channel, and drop those comments in the live chat. I'm going to read off some of the comments here. Alonso at a price. Mets winning matters, not exactly the players. Absolutely, Drifter. I do agree with that. It's about the name on the front, not the back. Alonso's a winning player. And this core, right? If we talk about this core, and we'll get into that here in just a second, do you believe, Dan, this is a question I'm going to just flat out ask you, and this has to go into the Mets front office conversations when they're talking about a Pete Alonso contract, especially for the money that he may want. Do we believe in this core of players? You just named them off, right? Nimmo, McNeil got his money. Lindor got his money. Diaz is on a long-term deal, 5 more years of him. Do we believe in this Mets core coupled with a guy like Francisco Alvarez to win a championship in the next, let's say, 3 to 4 years, whatever Pete Alonso's prime of his career is going to be? Because if you're paying $30+ million for Pete Alonso, it's for the production in the first half of his contract. If it's an 8-year deal, 9-year deal, he has got 3 to 4 more years of his prime left, right? Being 29 going on 30. You're paying for the numbers in those first 4 years. Are the home runs going to reduce? Maybe, maybe not, but he's not going to be that same player age 34, 35. I think we can all agree on that. So do we believe as Mets fans and the front office, presumably, in this Mets core to win a championship in the next 3 to 4 years?
Me personally, Chris, I do. We saw in 2022 that 101 win team. I mean, it was great what we saw. And I'm going to touch on another X factor person who I think is a part of the core, Starling Marte. He's going to have to be a guy that really steps up this year if this team wants to really take a next step. We look to McNeil, we look to Nimmo, we look to Lindor. Absolutely. Lindor and Alonso are in their own category. I think they are, because they're going to play every day. They're going to do what they do. There's no question about their work ethic. There's no question about what they bring to the ballpark every single day. There's questions, and we'll get later on into the show about, Nimmo moving into left field with Bader. What's that going to bring? I understand all that. If you want to talk about a core that can win, I understand that Miami finished ahead of us last year. I understand that the Phillies are really good. I understand that the Braves are probably one of the best teams, if not the best team in baseball other than the Dodgers. I understand that. But at the same time, this Mets team is prime. This Mets team is seasoned. This Mets team has a lot of good pieces going for it. And is that delusional? Maybe. Maybe that's just what we are and what, the Mets fans that we are. But I don't think it is. I don't think it is to bank on a Severino really good season bouncing back. I don't think that's out of the realm of possibility. Otherwise, the Mets wouldn't have signed him. David Stearns went to Harvard. He knows what he's talking about, and Steve Cohen's not just going to throw money at the whim and hoping that something just sticks. That's not how this works, and they do their research. They do what they got to do. Is this core sustainable? long term, I don't know. What's Brett Beatty going to be? He could be traded in 3 years. I have no idea. But at the same time, it's like, can this team compete? Absolutely. Can this team win? Absolutely. Can this team, win a World Series? That's where you kind of need other pieces, maybe a Juan Soto next year, maybe another big bat. But in terms of a wild card, we saw what the 84-win Diamondbacks did this year. They snuck in and went to the World Series. So at the end of the day, anything can happen. That's why I keep saying wild card, wild card, wild card. Just sneak in. That's all that matters. We're not looking for the division this year. Anyone that is crazy.
Absolutely. Perfectly said. I have nothing to add on to that fact because you just said my entire sentiment in your spiel there. I have nothing else to add on. That was perfect. Well said, Dan. Carlos, I agree with you here. And I'm going to just throw this comment up here as well. Nobody else is going to pay Pete more than Freddie. I'll put money on it. I would put money on it too. But the only reason why I maybe wouldn't on the flip side of things, and I truly do think, like I said, I'm not going to go back and backtrack on my statement that he's going to be the highest paid first baseman AAV wise when he gets his contract, whether it's this season, off season, or next off season. But you got other first base targets and first base options hitting the market as well, albeit a little bit older. You got Paul Goldschmidt on the market. You got Anthony Rizzo hitting the market next offseason. You got Christian Walker, who's also another premier power bat, going to be hitting the market in terms of the first base category too. So that's maybe the only reason why I wouldn't put money on it. But I will say, Carlos, if you want to chat me in the DMs on Twitter after this and put some money on it, listen, I'm not gonna back down from that because honestly, I can't see Pete Alonso getting less than $27 million a year. I just can't. I said it all off season, and nothing to what I've seen in terms of how these contract negotiations are playing out is making me think any less of that. So that's all I'll say on.
One quick thing to that too, and I talked about it before. He signed that contract when he was 32, and he goes back to Atlanta. You see him tearing up and he's crying. Freddie Freeman. It's like he kind of regretted that. Obviously, maybe he didn't. I don't want to speak for Freddie Freeman, but there might be a part of him that said, maybe I should have stayed in Atlanta. Maybe I should have, just kind of sucked it up and taken my, couple less dollars and, been the guy for the whole career with that one team. I get all that. Pete Alonso might be in that position. He very well could be. And I don't want to see Pete Alonso with the Cubs. That could be a team that's obviously floated around. The Blue Jays is another team that's floated around. But again, Pete Alonso loves this city. He embraces this city. He cares about this city. You go on Instagram, he's liking Instagram reels of pizzerias in Brooklyn. It's like this guy really cares. So again, I'm going to leave it with that. And again, that's all I can say about it.
Hey, listen, we got some breaking news on the show, man. Pete Alonso, your guy, just agreed to an arbitration value of $20.5 million. Yep. We got some breaking news on the show. Okay. We were just talking about this before we went live as well, because Spotrac projected at 21.1. And we're like, okay, let's see how that happens. Because I thought it was going to be maybe closer to 22, like Ibby's pointing out here. But John Heyman just tweeted out 20.5. The Mets settle with Pete Alonso, which, in terms of the grand scheme of things of an actual contract extension, I don't know where that puts the Mets, because a lot of people were saying, shout out to Carson from the Mets Weekly Pod, was saying that if Pete Alonso and the Mets hold out, that might signify an extension talk being sort of worked out, right? But I think for the Mets, and I think that this can put a lot of Mets fans at ease right now with him getting this out of the way and not at a stalemate, right? Because they would have went to litigation. Pete Alonso would have thrown out a number, and you know how the whole arbitration process works. And Aaron Judge, 2 off seasons ago, was very close in terms of doing that with the Yankees, but happy that Pete Alonso gets his 20.5 for the season. And I guess really the contract extension watch is going to sort of be taking place throughout this whole season, because like I said, with this value right now, I'm not really sure if the extension is going to be reached before the season starts. So we'll see. But like I said, breaking news.
Well deserving.
Absolutely.
Well deserving, man. Jeez,
absolutely.
Let's go.
We got Ben in the chat. Dan, I say 83 and 79 for the record. We'll get into our buy and sell segment of the show. We have a buy and sell segment. We'll have about 6 to 7 slides to run through, and the Mets record will be one of them, Ben. So hold on to your hats. We will go ahead and answer that question. David's predicting 88 wins. Let's get it. Might be a little bit of an optimistic number, David, but I like the optimism at this point of the offseason, to be honest with you.
Listen, a lot of optimism coming from both sides of us. I think we can definitely say that. And we'll get into it, obviously. But yeah, very optimistic. But hey, listen, I can't complain. I really can't.
Absolutely. Patty's excited about the Pete Alonso
That's
arbitration news,
crazy.
saying
Let's go.
OMG. Absolutely.
Just updated my
Carlos giving
arbitration tracker real quick. Gotta just do
Oh
that.
yeah, you've been tracking. Yeah. So like I said, make sure you guys following Dan on all the social handles. He's on top of the arbitration, especially on X. Dan Bartels too. You know what to do. Go give him a follow. Great
Appreciate it.
stuff. Absolutely. So all right. We got the breaking news out of the way. Pete Alonso is going to be the Mets first baseman for at least the opening day of 2024. And we'll get into more Pete Alonso news as it comes out later on in the season, etc. But let's take a look at where this 2024 Mets team, the roster is currently standing. And I understand opening day is a 26-man roster and you see 27 names on your screen. That is because there's a mystery guy, and his name is Joey Lucchesi, who also came to an arbitration agreement. And I have no idea how the Mets are going to use Joey Lucchesi. On Fangraphs, this is basically taken right from Fangraphs and what their projections are. And I have to say, the reason why I put it on here is because I completely agree with them. But for me and my thinking, I think that the Mets go with a six-man rotation. I think Joey Lucchesi would be that sixth option. Obviously, the guys in green are new additions, and you have the bench down there below, presumably DJ Stewart, Omar Narvaez, if they don't find a trade partner for Narvaez, because that's been a report the last couple of days as well. Joey Wendell and Tyrone Taylor also coming to an arbitration agreement today with the New York Mets. Where do you assess this 2024 Mets roster as it currently stands? Obviously, like I said, a long way to go until now in opening day. But with the additions that we're seeing here, what's the confidence level? I have to ask.
I think they're pushing all the right buttons, right? I think they're doing what David Stearns sought out to say that he would do. He would build a competitive team, and he's doing it. Whether we like to admit it or not, we want the star-studded guys. We want the Juan Sotos, the Cody Bellingers, the Jorge Solers even of the world, right? But I think we're doing a good job of kind of building something that's able to be competitive. And whether that rotation, I understand that rotation compared to last year, I think we're kind of spoiled in the sense too that we had Scherzer and Verlander last year, and we kind of, are running it back with Kodai Senga at the top of the helm, and that's fine. Honestly, I'm perfectly fine with Senga as our ace. In a perfect world, yeah, he's probably a 2 or a 3, if we're going to be honest. But again, I'm okay with it. I'm okay with what's going on. And speaking about a six-man rotation, they have to have a six-man rotation if they want to keep Kodai Senga healthy. If you look at his numbers, he's statistically way better when he gets that extra day of rest. And the Mets did a good job last year of kind of building it into the schedule, an off day, and they would, move Senga back a day to give him 6 days rest. I understand that. And whether the way of the MLB and where it's moving and the six-man rotations, I understand that too. But 3 years from now, most teams are probably going to have a six-man rotation. The Mets might be ahead of the curve in that regard, sure. But again, by the same token, I think it's good for what the Mets are doing. They have Edwin Diaz back. A lot of people forget that too. We have Edwin Diaz coming back. He was the best closer in 2022. 2023, obviously, he didn't pitch. We understand that. But, what's he going to be? And we'll get into that later in the show as well. But I really do think this team, with the additions of Harrison Bader, being able to move Nimmo to a corner outfield spot, having Nimmo being able to want to move to a corner outfield spot as well, that's a big thing. This core, Lindor, Marte, Alonso, McNeil, we can't forget this team is pretty good. It really is. It's a good team up and down the board. It's just going to come down to the kids. What's Brett Beatty going to be? What's Alvarez going to be? Vientos, who I've been high on for a long time, and a lot of people have pushed back on. Beatty's the third baseman of the future. Okay, sure, I could see it, but I could also see Vientos as the third baseman of the future. And at the end of the day, this team is ready. This team is primed, and it's a pretty good team to compete. It really is.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think that there are definitely some, obviously, roster holes still missing. We'll get into our wish list here on the next screen, but I'll just talk about this for a second. We got close to 40 people in the chat, 37 floating between 41. Like I said, hit that thumbs up, subscribe to the channel, all that good stuff. In the description, you can find all of Dan's social media handles. But let's get on to the topic of Harrison Bader moving to center field, right, and taking over those duties. This was a perfect signing as a bridge type signing. And we'll talk about a potential buy or sell projection for Drew Gilbert in 2024. Obviously, we heard the news of Drew Gilbert starting in AAA Syracuse at the start of 2024. David Stearns, that came directly from David Stearns' mouth. So I'm very excited about that because he's been honestly hands down my favorite Mets prospect for quite some time when he came over, and he absolutely raked in the 35 game sample size that we saw of him in Binghamton last season in Double A. So that is something that I'm excited for. It provides the Mets outfield a lot of flexibility, a lot of relief, and a lot of good defense up the middle, especially like you said, Nimmo wanting to and being willing to move to a corner outfield spot. Presumably, when the Mets signed Nimmo to an extension, they signed him at market value for the center field spot. But him being a veteran, having injury history, and like I said, this outfield does have injury history. That's one of my main concerns, right? That's where I think we can see Drew Gilbert sooner rather than later because Harrison Bader has had trouble staying on the field. Nimmo has had his fair share of injury concerns. And Starling Marte, obviously coming off of a double groin surgery, also has his injury concerns. So that remains to be seen. The rotation, honestly, I'm going to be objective with you all. I love the additions of Severino and Manaea in terms of what upside they can bring in terms of what they did last season versus what they can do in 2024. But the same thing in terms of longevity. Severino having injury history. What is he going to look like? Quintana missed the first half of 2023. Senga, obviously, like you said, needs that extra day, presumably, and that's why we're talking about a six-man rotation in the first place. That also is a key. So I like the depth piece signings, and obviously I'm talking about the majority of the bullpen, but I like these signings at face value because they scream to me, let's compete, but let's have it be a bridge year. That's what they scream to me. And I think the Mets are going to be competitive. Right now, I'm projecting them. Actually, I won't get into that because we're going to get into that a little bit later. But I do think they can sneak into a wild card, objectively. So I like the additions, but I would like to see this roster fill out a little bit more. I do think that we have 2 to 3 positions on the roster that do need upgrading. And we'll talk about Andy Martino's report here in just a second. But I really do like what the Mets are doing with the bullpen. It's a classic David Stearns, Milwaukee Brewers days-esque bullpen. You're talking about guys like Michael Tonkin and Austin Adams, two guys that not many Mets fans, when the Mets signed them, were really high on. But you go into their savant pages, you go and look at what their off-speed arsenal has to offer. These guys can really stick in the front end, a front of the bullpen that really has struggled in recent years. We talk about Drew Smith, who's still on your screen, obviously by default, but maybe his workload goes down in 2024. Drew Smith struggled. Sean Reed Foley has been okay at times, but also has struggled. You talk about a whole plethora of other names in the front of the bullpen that the Mets tried to piece together in 2023, and now we have fresh, familiar faces, and I like that. Jorge Lopez, former All-Star in Baltimore, obviously had a down 2023 when he went over to Minnesota, but he has the capability of being a setup man in the eighth inning. Now, I'm not saying that's where he's going to start because he needs to prove himself. We still have Brooks Raley, and we'll see if we add an actual eighth inning dominant type reliever. But I like the way this bullpen is starting to formulate top to bottom. And like I said, the lineup for me, it honestly has the ability to be better than last year, depending on those wild cards, like you said. Like, it's not hard to beat last year, but we don't know what we're going to get at Vientos. Presumably, if we don't sign a DH, we'll get into that here in just a second. If we don't sign a DH, can Vientos be that 20 to 25 home run guy in the major leagues like I project him out to be? He has that pop. The strikeouts are going to be there by default, but he has that pop. Is he going to be a type of guy that can slot behind a Pete Alonso and be protection for him in that lineup? No, absolutely not. That's why I'm still advocating for a DH, but he has the upside, and I think a lot of people are forgetting that. Starling Marte, are we going to get a sliver of 2022 Starling Marte, or is it going to continue on the 2023 trajectory? That's what we all want to know. And obviously, the main guy here, Brett Baty. I hear a lot of people talking about, let's go sign a third baseman. Let's go and plug in Vientos as a third baseman. You cannot logistically tell me that 2024 is a bridge year and not give Brett Baty the third baseman role. You can't do it because, like you said, there's two sides of the fence. There's like a fork in the roadway when it comes to Brett Baty. And when you're driving up to that fork, this is the 2024 year, and at the end, we'll know which direction we're going. He's either going to go this way and be the Mets' future third baseman, or he's going to go this way, and he's going to be trade bait for maybe even peanuts next offseason when his trade value continues to be low. So, like I said, I like the way this Mets roster is shaking out compared to what the plan is this season. Listen, Dan, I'm objective. I think the Mets can win, and I think they can be a competitive ball club this year, even given this roster, even if they don't add anything. If this is the roster, they can be competitive. Do I think they need more? Absolutely. But it's about evaluating talent. It's about signing those short-term deals to set yourself up for success in the 2025 offseason, which David Stearns has done perfectly so far.
I think the Mets have also set themselves up where at the trade deadline, God forbid, they want to sell, right? They can. Sean Manaea opted out of his contract last year with the Giants. That's why he's with the Mets now. There's opportunities for this team to be able to be flexible for once, right? Isn't that nice that we have actually options to work with? Bader's going to be what he is. I think he'll be here all of next year. We'll get into the whole Jet Williams thing, but I really do think Bader's going to be here all year. I don't see him going anywhere. I don't see him, Hauser's going to eat up his innings. Quintana's going to eat up his innings. Lucchesi and, McGill are wild cards. And obviously we have Peterson coming back probably mid-May, early June with the injury that he had as well in the surgery. But, Ronnie Mauricio, it's a tough loss on the offensive side. Absolutely. There's offensive pieces that we don't really know what they're going to be. That's why I'm confident in Marte. He's having the whole Dominican League to kind of get this under his belt, get a little ramp up, as David Stearns calls it, as getting ready for spring training. That's what Marte needs, right? He needs something to, have some confidence going into the year, because we know what Marte's arm is. And a lot of people underrate what his arm is. He has one of the best arms in baseball,
Absolutely.
and as a fielder. And, it stinks. And he stole 23 bags last year in the minimum games that he played. So I think that if he can play, let's call it 120 games, let's be safe, 130 if at the max. We're not going to expect 140, 150 out of Marte. It would be crazy too. But I think if we can get 120 games out of Marte healthy, a platoon out there with Tyrone Taylor, DJ Stewart, it should be a good team. I really don't think this team there's flexibility. And in terms of the bullpen, yeah, we need some more pieces in there. And we'll get into it later in the show who we want. We need some more lefties in there. We need some more flexibility in that regard. But again, you have Edwin Diaz manning down that bullpen, the best closer in baseball. I don't care that Josh Hader wants more money than him. Frankly, he's not deserving of it, if we're going to be honest. Edwin Diaz has earned that money. He's adjusted in New York. He's done his thing. He has over 50 saves to his credit in his time with the Mariners. And he came over and 32 saves in his past 2 seasons. So I really do think, we can be competitive enough. The bullpen will be fine. But again, where's the offense? But again, we have flexibility. So it's a tough dichotomy to figure out. But I think this Mets team is going to fit the bill and shock a lot of people.
Absolutely, absolutely. And dichotomy, man. I'm pulling out the vocabulary on me. I love it, man. Let's get to some of the comments here. We got 44 people in the chat. I thoroughly appreciate the support. Always appreciate the support. Make sure you hit that thumbs up, subscribe to the channel, all that good stuff. Let's see here. I had a starting point here. Okay, we got depressed Mr. Met in the chat, checking out the stream. I appreciate it. Thank you so much.
You're depressed too. No, I'm kidding.
Yeah, Kendrick is checking out the chat, saying it looks good. We'll just have to score a little bit more runs with, I guess he's assuming, or he's presuming, who we have in the rotation. So it's not a bad assessment as well. Drifters agreeing with you, Dan, as well. Get ahead of the curve.
Me too.
Absolutely. David's pointing out that we have Bryce Montes Diaca, flamethrower, throwing gas, coming back as well from his injury. Carlos agreeing with you as well, Dan. I beg our fans not to judge the 2024 Mets based on record. Have no expectations, to be honest. Not a bad thing. Judge this team in 2025 because it's a plan being executed. Results equals 2025. And to this point, Carlos, very well said. Dan, what do you think the realistic expectation is in terms of grading David Stearns? A lot of people judging David Stearns, first and foremost, I know it's very far-fetched. You're a part of Mets Twitter. I'm a part of Mets Twitter. We see those tweets saying this is small market Stearns, this is small market Mets ever since David Stearns took over. Realistically, he's been the Mets president of baseball operations and acting as GM the last, 3 months ever since he's took over. What's the realistic expectation in terms of fully grading David Stearns? And when do you expect that to start? Because honestly, personally, before you go, I can't grade David Stearns until at least the 2025 offseason. I just can't.
Well, for me, he was with Milwaukee on a limited payroll, and a lot of people, we're going to talk about the Martino 10 million, gap, whatever it is, but Stearns was on the show with Joel Sherman and John Heyman. I know you saw the show, as did I. And he said there's no spending capabilities. He's not worried about spending. He's going to go out there and do what he has to do. And he understands that Steve Cohen wants to win, and working under a guy like Steve Cohen, it's a lot easier to win. I get last year what it was. A lot of Mets fans are upset. I understand. But in terms of grading David Stearns, I think he's doing a good job. I really do. I don't think it's out of the realm of possibility to sit here and say that this team that he's built is good enough to compete, whatever you want to call competing, right? In terms of getting in the playoffs, in terms of, making it to an LCS, in terms of making it to a World Series. There's different levels of competition. I understand that. But in terms of what David Stearns has done, I get you need a little more time to grade what he's done. But in terms of just the pieces alone, what he's brought in, he understands that it's a bridge year. He understands that it's high risk, high reward. That's why he brought in a Sevy. Sevy is up there with an ace in this league. He really is. We saw what he was in 2017, 2018. Yankee fans will tell you, Met fans will tell you now. We have a lot of expectations, a lot of upside, but we're also banking on the understanding that we understand that these guys can get hurt. They can. We could sit here and be in May and be out of it. That's just the reality of it. We've been through that. June of last year was the worst month in Mets baseball history. So I don't think it's out of that realm of possibility to say that, David Stearns doesn't know what he's talking about. Sure. But he's banking on the idea of hope. And I get that hope is not a strategy. Steve Cohen says that all the time. But, you have to go into this season with a hopeful mindset. Trust in David Stearns, because I do. I think he knows what he's doing. He's an analytical guy. He understands how this operation works. And he's banking on it. He's banking on upside. And again, that's all we can do. We don't have, the Juan Sotos walking in our door this year. We just don't.
Yeah, no, absolutely. I mean, and hopefully we do in 2025, but we'll get to that when we get to it. Absolutely spot on. Couple other things here I want to talk about in terms of this comment right here. Vasil and Scott have to emerge. Vasil absolutely is going to get that shot in spring training if I had to guess. Christian Scott could definitely be a name we see in 2024, but is a little bit further along the road, or not as far along the road, I should say, as a Mike Vasil. Do you have any sort of expectations in terms of looking at this rotation and Mike Vasil cracking it come opening day?
So for me, Vasil out of Virginia, 9th round, 232nd pick. I mean, he's a guy that I never had a lot of expectations for personally, right? But I've seen him play now for a while. His stuff is very good. His stuff is very good. I have his numbers somewhere in front of me. I can get them. But again, 5-6, 4.65 ERA last year in minor league baseball in 2023. 26 games started, 124 innings pitched. I hate to be a stats guy, but in terms of Vasil, I feel like it's justified. 138 strikeouts. He has over a strikeout an inning. That's not bad, for what it is. And 1.22 whip. So Vasil's a guy, and I've said this for a while. He reminds me of Garrett Cole. You watch his delivery, you watch his build. He's 6'5", 225, I believe his weight is as well. He's a horse. This guy's going to be good. But again, in terms of expectations, I know it'll be a question later on too, but I might as well just kind of answer it now. I don't expect him to be up for a while. I really don't. And that's just my opinion. That's just maybe, far-fetched or what it is. But Vasil's great. Don't get me wrong. And I hope the Mets are in the position that we don't need Vasil. I hope, Peterson comes back, does his thing, gets slotted to wherever he is, end of the rotation in the bullpen, whatever it is. But Vasil, Christian Scott, same thing. I mean, these guys are good. David Stearns has said in his press conference, I was there in the Luis Severino, Harrison Bader press conference, and he was saying, I expect these guys to be good. I'm excited about these upper level prospects. I hope that they are, good enough for what we expect. And they will be. They'll get their opportunities. Don't get me wrong. But again, is that time now? I don't know. Opening day, I really don't think so. I think it's going to be a little while. They need some seasoning as well. Even Jet Williams, he's going to start in AAA this year. That's going to be great for him. Awesome. But again, these guys need time. It took Ronnie Mauricio till September to be called up. We were pleading for him every single week of the year last year. Please call up Ronnie Mauricio. What's the wait? And, he finally got called up and he amazed. So if the Mets are in a position where Vasil has to be called up, that's not a good thing. That's not a good thing.
Yeah, absolutely. Did they announce, by the way, officially that Jet Williams is going to be in AAA, or is that something
I believe
they did?
Yeah.
Okay. I'll have to go back and look at that. I have not heard of that, but I definitely trust your word on that. And it would make sense because he's another high riser as well in the rankings, just like Drew Gilbert has been. Drifter saying, CP, you should do infomercials. You're straight selling. Just kidding. Seriously, they have a shop, but they need surprises. Yeah, I appreciate you, Drifter. Honestly, when I get into my rants, I honestly could make some extra side cash with some infomercials. So if you need any small businesses,
I was wrong.
hit me
I
up.
was wrong. It is Drew Gilbert. I totally misspoke. It's not Jett Williams. Drew Gilbert will start in
Drew
Triple A.
Gilbert's gonna be triple.
Yep.
Okay, that's what
Yep.
I thought. I was gonna say I was a little bit
I get them
surprised when you said Jett
confused.
Williams.
Yeah.
I was like, hold on, did I
Yeah,
not?
yeah.
That's huge news.
No, I
So,
get them
yeah,
confused
Drew
very
Gilbert is
easily.
gonna be a triple A. Absolutely.
Yep.
Ibby is saying that he wants the Mets to bring him Justin Turner. I'm fully in that boat as well. We'll talk about it in the next slide after we go through a couple more comments. Carlos is laughing at Drifter, saying that I should be an infomercial spokesperson. Let's
Mets
see here.
promo. CP on Mets promo.
Absolutely. Like I said, small businesses, hit me up. Got Josh B in the house saying even CP. What up, Josh? I appreciate you. Thank you so much. Yuki's coming in with 77 wins for the 2024 Mets. We'll get into that. I definitely respect that. I don't think that's far off. But that's all I'll say for now. Let's see. Absolutely. Being part of Mets Twitter is like being checked into a Mets list. It's brutal out here. It is brutal. It is brutal.
It is.
Ricky
We love it.
Vaughn, absolutely. Let's go get the wild thing, man. Let's go get the wild thing.
Ricky Vaughn. Oh my gosh.
We got Grant checking out the
Grant.
chat, the channel LFGM. Appreciate you, Grant. Thank you so much. I'm so happy that you got your account back on Twitter as well. Shout out to you. Let's see here. Jay, a lot of what ifs, but if things fail right, it could be a fun season, Jay. Absolutely. I think a lot of people are getting their hopes up way too early. It could be a little bit of a fun season that we have, especially come the trade deadline. So let's see here. Carlos saying the F got Pete in trouble. I think it was after that Rays series. He hit the walk-off. Yeah, man. I mean,
Jerry Seinfeld didn't approve of that either, but it's whatever.
Yeah, it is what it is. It is what it is.
I don't buy into all that personally, but
Right. Grant saying Christian Scott is the best out of all the prospects, in my opinion. Vasil could be a solid number 3. And I think that's what the consensus is, right? Mike Vasil is probably a little bit further up in the chain, even though in terms of readiness, right? Even though he did finish off a little slower in 2023, but Christian Scott is really that premier prospect pitching wise that the Mets have severely lacked and still severely lack outside of him. I like Blade Tidwell as well. I probably like, if I had to rank the pitchers that I like in the Mets farm system, Christian Scott 1, Blade Tidwell's probably equally up there. I'd say maybe 1B for me, just because I love what I saw in his Tennessee days, and then Mike Vasil at number 3. So absolutely, Grant, you're absolutely right in terms of Christian Scott. Also mentioning Tyler Stewart's name as well can make an impact. So the Mets do have options. Contrary to popular belief, they do have pitchers coming up, right? They do have pitchers coming up. And I think a lot of people forget about that. David's saying Dominic Hamill and Tidwell as well. Absolutely. Do not sleep on Blade Tidwell. I'm going to say that first and foremost. I am a big Blade Tidwell supporter. So
Vasil will be the first guy that gets up to the big leagues. I can definitely say that, with certainty.
Absolutely. Got Mr. Nobody in the chat. A lot of young talent coming up soon. A rich owner, a lot of depth pieces building with Stearns. Things look good ahead. Still could be better with a DH, 2 bullpen arms, and a trade for another starter. Thank you, Mr. Nobody. This is going to transition us right into our next topic in terms of our top 3 wish list. And we'll talk about Andy Martino's report after, because I don't want his report to dampen our moods in terms of what the Mets realistically still need to be the best ball club that they can be in 2024. But we do know that budgetary constraints, if indeed true, would have an impact on this. But let's have a little bit of fun anyways. Here's my top 3 wish list from now until the end of the offseason, and here's Dan's. I'm going to let you explain your top 3 here first, Dan, and then we'll get into mine, and we'll have a discussion. Anybody's name that you don't see on here, obviously we limited the top 3. There's other names that we like, obviously. If there's a name that you don't see on this list that you like, whether it's you, Dan, or in the chat, feel free to drop it in the comment section down below, and we'll talk about it. Go ahead.
So obviously there's a couple other names we'll touch on, as you said, but for me, my top 3, you guys see it right there: Justin Turner, Jesus Luzardo, and David Robertson. So I'm going to start with JT. Justin Turner, 2011, 2012, 2013. He played with the Mets, came from the Orioles, went to the Dodgers, then finished with the Red Sox. He's age 38 season. Last year, he hit 23 home runs. He can certainly be a guy, 146 games played last year. 96 RBI, slash line 276, 345, 455 with an 800 OPS. I mean, I get it's not the best numbers in the world, but it provides that flexibility that we talk about all the time. Joey Wendell's going to be a guy that we look to as a utility guy to play third base sometimes, right? Or, second base if McNeil has an off day. But Justin Turner, getting him in there can be something that, a lot of Mets fans kind of were deprived of. And, Beatty and Vientos aren't going to be, hitting at a 330 clip all year long. They're going to have their struggles. I can guarantee you that. So having Justin Turner in there, 38 years old, maybe sign him to a 1-year deal, 2-year deal with an opt-out, maybe see what happens. Have him retire a Met. That'd be awesome. I think a lot of Mets fans, especially me and you, Chris, we grew up in those Justin Turner, Ike Davis days. They were best friends. They were like, peanut butter and jelly. So I really do think that seeing the growth of Justin Turner, all the tribute videos, it would be really good for Mets fans to see. And it would provide that flexibility. And again, a DH bat where it's not JD Martinez, where you're restricted to just him being a DH, right? You don't want that. Gio Urshela is great too, but he's more on the defensive side. So again, I think Justin Turner would be a great addition. That's just personally me. I know you have it too. We'll talk about that. Jesus Luzardo, again, a lefty. Mets fans certainly need the lefties pitching, especially, from a starting pitcher position, especially in what Miami was. They're kind of looking more towards the offensive side of the ball, especially now, and kind of selling off some of their pitchers. I think we've kind of seen that for a while now. And Miami's certainly in the position where they're just as good enough a team as the Mets, and certainly in terms of upside. And it kills us to say that, right? It really does. But at the end of the day, I think Jesus Luzardo can really be a difference maker for this team in terms of what we're looking for, in terms of lefty, high velocity stuff, good stuff, really good stuff. Not top tier, not ace-like stuff, but again, slot in the middle of the rotation, eat up innings. Hauser's going to do his thing. Quintana's going to do his thing. I think Sevy's going to shock a lot of people. So having Jesus Luzardo in there, David Peterson's not going to be a starter this year from a lefty side of the ball, right? So you have Quintana in there. You have Minaya. You don't want 3 lefties. I understand that, but one of them's going to have to be, figure out what's going to happen. Minaya could very well end up in the bullpen. Very
Absolutely.
well. So that very well could happen. It's happened before in his history with other teams, and he's fared pretty well. He's fared well as a starter, but again, he's fared well in the pen as well. So that's something to look out for. And again, lastly, David Robertson. We all know the reunion of David Robertson. We would love it to happen. It kind of started that whole, shock factor last year. David Robertson got shipped. All right, the Mets are waving the white flag. It's over. That's what happened. And David Robertson would be a great addition. It would be a cheap deal. Bruce Sutter was a guy who I thought, and we talked about it, he went to the Reds on a $2.5 million deal with an opt-out option after 2 years, I believe. That's someone that I really look to, someone who I really would have liked, especially with his ties with David Stearns and the Brewers. That would have been a great piece for the Mets. Obviously, they didn't luck out. Unfortunate. That's what happens. But again, David Robertson would be a guy that I don't think a lot of people are talking about. We talked about it when he left the Mets. We would love to have him back. No one's talking about it now. Whether he stays in Miami, sure, whatever, But again, I really do think these 3 guys, but specifically Robertson, I think would be a great piece, an 8th inning setup man to help Diaz, And again, DH, we need a DH. We do. And Justin Turner would be awesome. I think he would. Jorge Soler is the guy who I've really wanted. If we're going to be honest, Cody Bellinger is the guy who I want. But again, it's not my money. That's not going to happen. But again, Justin Turner would be a great addition to this team. And again, they need a DH, for crying out loud. They really do. So, it is what it is. Those are my 3 guys. CP, let me know what you got to say about yours, though.
Yeah, dude, absolutely, man. Jesus Luzardo, we saw some smoke there with the Marlins, basically not knowing what their future is going to hold, kind of in limbo, especially with a Sandy Alcantara injury going to be missing this upcoming season. They really haven't reached out to Jorge Soler in terms of a contract extension after he opted out. So I think they're definitely on the way, even though as a mediocre sort of like borderline wild card team as they are, like we just said, right? They're sort of on the Mets' level right now. Maybe even a little bit in a better position in terms of upside on the roster. They're sort of in limbo, right? Their GM, I think it was Kim, left. She pursued other opportunities. So I think she was their GM, acting GM. I'm not sure what she was, where her official title was, but she controlled the roster over there and she left. So I'm not sure what kind of plans they have. Jesus Luzardo is definitely a name that I like. We both have Justin Turner on there. I get asked a lot this offseason on the other live streams that I do, who would you rather have? A guy like JD Martinez or Justin Turner, right? Not taking Jorge Soler into the equation because I don't think that contract's going to be feasible with what he's looking for. And I know that there's sort of speculation that he might get a little bit less than what he's looking for, and we can re-engage in those talks about Jorge Soler when that actually comes to fruition, right? When it gets serious. But I think that the main consensus in terms of fit has been JD Martinez or a Justin Turner. And like you said, Giroshella, great defensively, but offense just isn't there. I understand that he hit 299 last season in limited sample size with the Angels, but he hit 2 home runs, not a power hitter. Again, Justin Turner, all fields hitter. A true pro's pro, has that defensive capability, can play backup first base behind Pete Alonso. If anything happens to McNeil or he needs to move to the outfield, can play second base. Brett Beatty needs a day off. He's not going to overtake Brett Beatty's position. I think a lot of people are saying that. A lot of people are buying into that. If he was to be brought in, he's 39 years old, people. We are buying him for his bat. We're giving him money for his bat. That's it. Nothing more, nothing less. Maybe a couple games in the field when other guys need days off, right? All fields hitter, former Met, the reunion, that story is always great, but all fields hitter, power. I know he only turned in 23 home runs last season, but his power numbers, they're a little bit underrated. I think Ibby said if he played at Citi Field last season, his projections were, I know projections, what if he played at a different stadium, I understand, but they were upwards of 28, 29 home runs compared to just the 23. So he has the potential to get you 25 plus home runs. I know he didn't do it last season, but sneaky power. That's why I prefer a Justin Turner. JD Martinez has been doing this for a long time. He's an all-star in each of his last 3 seasons. I understand that. He had a phenomenal season with the Dodgers. His contract situation is a little different. I think that he probably is the type of player that's going to command a 3-year deal after what he turned in last season. JD Martinez, that is. Justin Turner, maybe not so much. That plays into the Mets' strengths. But again, we're going to talk about in the next slide. Is Andy Martino accurate in his reportings or not? Because that's directly going to hinder or affect the Mets' ability and willingness, not even ability, just willingness to go out and get a Justin Turner. Wandy Peralta, self-explanatory. ERA in the 2s, last 3 seasons for the New York Yankees, rejuvenated his career with the New York Yankees, knows how to pitch in New York, predominantly off-speed type pitcher, great changeup, throws hitters off balance, gets hitters off balance, I should say. Fastball, I think he throws it at an under 10% clip, but when he does, it's 95 to 96. The sample size is there with Wandy Peralta. Don't care that he's an ex-Yankee. We've already gone down the ex-Yankee routes. Luis Severino, Harrison Bader. What's one more ex-Yankee? The Mets truly do need that 8th inning type guy. They really do. And I think it should be a lefty because you have flexibility at that point, depending on what happens with Joey Lucchesi and David Peterson when he comes back, to have 2 lefties in that pen. A 2-headed lefty monster in the pen with Brooks Raley and Wandy Peralta. So sign me up for Wandy Peralta all day because I think a lot of people are underrating his ability to be that elite 8th inning setup man in front of Edwin Diaz as well. He can do that. But like I said, with your David Robertson pick, if I had to pick a perfect world, I've said this already in my podcast, all my live streams I've done, if the Mets would sign 2 relievers in a perfect world for me this offseason, one would be David Robertson, righty, and one would be Wandy Peralta, lefty. Mm-hmm. That's what I would. So you covered David Robertson's side. I'm fully on board with that. Even if it's $10 million and that comes to fruition in Andy Martino's reports, then David Robertson, it smells like a David Robertson signing to me. And lastly, Freddie Peralta. Listen, if the Mets do have budgetary constraints, no problem. Freddie Peralta is making $5 million a year. He signed a 5-year, $15 million deal with the Milwaukee Brewers. I don't know why he signed it. I don't know what his agent was thinking, but he signed it. Luxury tax, cap hit of $8 million. Very cheap for what he provides. Like you said with Kodai Senga, fringe ace, will know concretely this year, but definitely number 2 in any rotation. Same thing with Freddie Peralta. He's a number 2 this year, would serve as that if the Mets trade for him, has the Milwaukee Brewers ties with David Stearns, but really is a solid 3 in a rotation that's going to be bolstered next year when Severino hits the open market if he doesn't get re-signed, when Quintana hits the open market, if Sean Manaea opts out of his deal and does great with the Mets in 2024 and signs elsewhere in 2025, with Hauser hitting the market. This rotation discussion we're going to keep having because guys are hitting the open market and we're signing guys to short-term deals in this rotation. So Freddie Peralta makes all the world of sense to me, has nasty stuff, and really has held it down for the Milwaukee Brewers alongside Corbin Burnes in that rotation. Obviously, Brandon Woodruff being hurt most recently. So, like I said, that's my wish list. You got 2 signings and 1 trade. And it all depends on our next slide here in Andy Martino. But I think that between these two these two categories and what I have and what you have, it's pretty good. It's pretty good to fill out the rest of the roster. What do you think?
Yeah, definitely. I think you talked about Wandy Peralta. I've loved that pick. I've talked to you about it. I really do think that's a good pick. I understand the whole Yankees Mets thing, and believe me, I understand. We don't want the leftovers of the Yankees. I understand that. But Wandy Peralta goes at hitters. Okay. So he attacks these guys. It's not like a Brooks Raley. He kind of, lives on the other half of the zone, outer edge of the zone, and kind of just tries to work on a slider, backdoor you, the whole nine. Wandy's going to go right at you. And we've seen that in the Subway Series even. And I understand the Marte walk-off against Peralta. I watch it all the time. I get it. But, I do think that the picks that you had are very good. I think JT is the guy. The DH is the position, and many Mets fans have been saying it till they're blue in the face. They need a DH. Who's it going to be? They need a DH. I think Justin Turner is the one that makes the most sense. I do. And I would love a JD Martinez. I think he has the most upside out of any of these guys that we're watching, besides Jorge Soler. But again, that's a whole contract thing, and it's probably the most money. But would Jorge Soler take a little bit less money to sign with the Mets? Maybe. I don't know. That would be a perfect thing. Do you think the Robert Murray thing was true about Soler and the Mets? See, I was going to mention that as well. I'm not sure. I don't think so. I don't want to undermine Robert Murray, okay? He's a great writer, and what he does is excellent, believe me. But there's been no other reports other than that of anything with Jorge Soler and the Mets, believe me. And it would be awesome. It really would. But again, if we're going to talk about these constraints, and I don't think there's constraints, we'll get into it as much as we think. But if Jorge Soler signs with the Mets, that would be awesome. This would turn this team into a real contender. Justin Turner would kind of get us over the hump, get us in the playoffs, whatever it would be. There'd be a lot more flexibility on the side with the DH. But again, I don't know. I don't know. Jorge Soler, it was a little fishy when I read it, no pun intended, with the Marlins, but it was weird. It was weird to see that, especially when no one else was reporting it. You would think a John Heyman would be all over that, a Joel Sherman, all these guys, right? I'm not so sure. I don't buy into it. But again, Robert Murray's pretty credible. So again, it's something you have to keep on the lookout for. But again, Justin Turner, I think it seems to be the consensus of the DH that we're looking at.
Yeah, absolutely. I don't buy it either. I'm not going to get my, my hopes up for a Jorge Soler in terms of this report. I don't think so. I think he turned in a great season last season, all-star, 36 home runs. We would be the perfect guy behind Pete Alonso. I just don't think the contract is going to be realistic for the Mets in terms of what they're looking for. To give out. So, and like you said, the DH, I mean, we need protection behind Pete Alonso. Starling Marte is not going to cut it. I understand that he might have a hell of a lot better of a season in 2024 than 2023, but he's no protection for Pete Alonso, and absolutely not. We've been wanting that premier power bat behind Pete Alonso. It's not Starling Marte.
One more thing, too. I think a lot of people forget you can slot Francisco Alvarez, maybe not this year, but I do think this year behind Pete Alonso. I think he's proven that he can be a real hitter in this league. But then you run into the problem because I go through my head and all these lineup projections, right? If you're going to put Alonso, Alvarez, and say Marte, right? 4, 5, 6. That's 4 or 3 rather righty hitters back to back to back. That's not the best situation if you're going to face a righty, dominant guy. So that's something you have to watch out for. I'd prefer a lefty. That's why I always say Juan Soto. That's why I always say, DJ Stewart's probably going to get a lot of reps at DH, whether we like it or not. Mark Vientos is great. Don't get me wrong. But again, if you want that righty lefty, that's why we look to Juan Soto, because he's that lefty. He fits the bill and he's excellent. So DH is tough. DH is a position of need. I would definitely say that. It's not a position of want anymore. It's a position of need.
Yeah, and I mean, honestly, I was tuning into shout out Wardy. I was tuning into his stream last night, and he does some great stuff, and he usually keeps it very objective. He keeps it even keel. But even he was saying like he cannot objectively talk about this team and act like the Mets can't or shouldn't sign a DH. Like we all know this. The top Mets content creators know this. We all know this on Twitter. Like if you were a fan of this team and have been watching this team for the last couple of seasons, we all know that what's been missing from this team is a competent DH. Like we got Daniel Vogelback and a platoon of Vogelback and Vientos last season. Like we need something, and Pete Alonso needs that as well. Great point as well that I wanted to give you some credit to in terms of the DJ Stewart thing. 3 righties in a row. We know that the Mets, in terms of the advanced stat category, or I guess the what would you call it? Whatever sort of, what is it? whatever the advanced metrics, whatever the front office is over there making decisions. Maybe not the head coach anymore, but what is it? What do
Analytical
they call
team.
it?
I don't know.
Yeah, the analytics team. Sorry, I was blanking. I was like,
No, you're
what
good.
is the
You're
word
good.
there?
You're good.
The analytics team. We know that they love to play the matchups. They have for the last couple of seasons. It's driven me crazy because there's certain situations I feel like you don't play the analytics, right? There's certain situations where I like a guy, even if he's going lefty, to stay out there and bat. That's not always the case. You have to look at the numbers. I understand they get paid to do something, but I think that that's where we're going to see a lot of DJ Stewart when there's that righty on the mound, and that's going to hinder some of Mark Vientos' at bats and the DH spot.
Another thing too, Billy Epler isn't with the Mets anymore for one simple reason, that phantom IL thing that he had to deal with, where he was starting, Daniel Vogelback in positions, telling Buck that analytically he should be the guy that plays today. He should be the guy that gets at bats. You would see Daniel Vogelback go 0 for 3 with a walk and then be in the 5-hole the next day. And I'm asking myself, like, that isn't right. There's something going on. And we saw months later, it cost Billy Epler his job, basically. That phantom IL spot, you can't do that. You can't go off analytics all the time. I like analytics. I do. I think they're great for the game. I definitely need them in what I do in broadcasting. It's great. But again, it's not the end all be all. A lot of it is the eye test. I'd say it's more than analytics. And a lot of people just kind of fall back on analytics. It's great, especially a guy like David Stearns. He will, but you can't let it get the best of you.
Yeah, absolutely. Could not have spoken truer words myself. There's just a time and place for it. And like I said, or like you said, Billy Epler would still be here if it wasn't for that phantom IL. I firmly believe that. So, whether you agree with it or not, I think that's the way the trajectory is going. But they pretty much forced their hand in terms of making him resign. So, none of your business is saying if you build it, they will come. Line from Field of Dreams. This is a 1 year that Stearns has built. Patience, Mets fans. I know it's not a strength of ours. Absolutely. Patience is not in Mets Twitter vocabulary or any sort of Mets fan vocabulary. And I can't blame those types of fans that get very emotional and that lets them overtake their takes. I can't blame them because, like, really, what sort of success have we been going, off of, right, in the past decade, right? We saw a 101 win season. We saw a wild card berth in 2016, a World Series that slipped away from us in 2015. But outside of that, man, like we've been rooting for peanuts, and we got Uncle Stevie in the house now, and we want to see success. So I don't think they're malicious with their intentions, but there's just a certain way to go about things when you talk about this team. Absolutely, patience is one word that we definitely need to sort of preach. Let's see here. Let's talk about some other guys that are looking good to the people in the comment section. Grant saying Brian Wu, I believe of the Mariners, starting pitcher. I think the Mariners are another team definitely to keep an eye out on in terms of the trade market for pitching. Maybe they need another bat, especially with Teoscar Hernandez leaving in free agency. Jorge Soler, absolutely. Ryan Stanek is a name that I love. I love Ryan Stanek. Absolutely, Grant. I'd be on board for Ryan Stanek. The bullpen, I think that a lot of people in the bullpen, a lot of free agents in the bullpen are definitely willing to take short-term deals, whether it's 1 year or 2 years as an opt-out. I think that's the way that the bullpen market has always been and will continue to be, minus maybe your Jordan Hickses and your Josh Haders. But Ryan Stanek, absolute underrated name alongside David Robertson that I would definitely like in terms of an addition, a right-handed addition to the bullpen.
Jordan Hicks was a guy, I've talked to you about it, how I was going to put him on my list of people that I kind of backtracked on it. I did, because I thought Jordan Hicks, really good season, okay season with the Blue Jays last year. He was all right on the Cardinals for what he is, but his stuff was always so electric, right? And if he could just locate it, it would be unhittable, essentially. With that fastball that he has, Jordan Hicks is a guy I did want to highlight. But again, it seems like with the reports, JP Morosi came out and said this morning, it seems like he might go to Houston or the Yankees. I'm going to assume more Houston because that's where he's from. It makes sense. But again, Jordan Hicks would be a really good piece too for this bullpen as an eighth inning setup guy to Edwin Diaz. But again, we can't have everything. We understand that. And the price might be out of the realm of possibility. So we'll see. Wu is an interesting one, Drifter. Absolutely.
Yeah, and David Rios is bringing up the name, obviously Jesus Luzardo. So, hypothetically, right? We talked about this on the Mets Hot Stove Live yesterday. We're talking Mets with Rob and Amish Country Mets fan Nelson. Shout out them if they're paying attention and tuning in. If not, hopefully they catch the replay. But to their credit, they're talking about this, right? The Marlins have been coveting Brett Baty for the last couple of seasons. There were sort of negotiations between the Mets and Marlins, and there's some mutual interest. And the Marlins were really interested in Brett Baty. Now, I think that if you do trade for a Jesus Luzardo, who's on your list, Brett Baty is maybe you can sell them on. Maybe Brett Baty is that guy that you sell them on. You'd be selling low. You'd have to include another top 10 Mets prospect, maybe even plus, but Brett Baty might be the centerpiece of that. So if let's just live in a hypothetical world where if that happens, is Matt Chapman a name that you like? Obviously, a qualifying offer attached to him. Matt Chapman's still on the market.
Listen, Matt Chapman would be great, but I can't sit here and say that he'd be a good fit for this Mets team because Matt Chapman's a guy that's going to require a lot of money and a lot of years. I really do think that. He's going to be a guy that's going to want to be locked down for a while. There's a reason why he hasn't been signed yet, right? We look to a Blake Snell. Why hasn't he been signed yet? Jordan Montgomery, same thing. These guys want a lot of years and a lot of money. So Matt Chapman's great. Probably a top 3 defensive third baseman in the league. Offensively is a little bit different. Again, the certain circumstances that he's had to deal with throughout his career, I think, can kind of justify why. But at the end of the day, Matt Chapman would be great. Don't get me wrong. I'm not going to sit here and say that that's not a piece that the Mets should go out and be sought after. But if you're going to be told, like you said, that it's a bridge year, Brett Baty's going to need his at-bats. And David Stearns, you listen to what he says, guys. This is the problem with Met fans. You have to listen to what these guys in the front office are saying. David Stearns is saying we have in-house candidates for third base, and we're perfectly okay with that. Whether we need a DH or not is a different story. But in terms of third base, you got your guy in Joey Wendell that can be the utility guy. It sucks. I know it does. Believe me. But again, we're not going to go out on the market and just say, okay, Brett Baty, another bench year for you. Mark Vientos, ride the pine for another year. That's not going to happen. I really don't think so.
Yeah, absolutely agree with you. That's why, I don't think Matt Chapman is feasible. I don't think he's ever been feasible for the Mets and their plans this offseason. But I absolutely agree with you. Let's see here. Drifter saying Harold Ramirez, DH for the Tampa Bay Rays, turned in, I think, 12 home runs last season, hit 313. A decent option. I don't say it's a great option for DH in terms of the home run power numbers that he displayed last season, but certainly an option, right? And the Rays love trading. Or is he a free agent? I think it'd be a trade. No,
probably be a trade. I'd have to check.
So
my free agent check.
So, but regardless, though, Harold Ramirez is definitely a name that intrigues me. But like I said, I mean, I honestly think at this point, if we're talking about constraints here, is it feasible to go out and sign a DH? But we don't know if it's true. Like Andy Martino, we'll talk about it here in just a second before we get to the next slide. I'm just catching up on some comments here. Like, it's a toss-up. Andy Martino has been right on a lot of things regarding the Mets, but he's also been wrong quite a few times about the Mets. And we all know the bias that he reports with on the Mets in terms of, the Mets versus Yankees. That's very evident, and that's why I don't really like to listen to Andy Martino. But at the end of the day, I'm not going to question his insiders because it's very clear that, one, he works for SNY, and two, that he has Mets insiders. So we'll see. Ibby's saying clubhouse culture is a big thing. Turner can add a strong presence to the clubhouse culture, especially to better the youth of Brett Baty and Mark Vientos. I think so as well. Absolutely. We saw with Eduardo Escobar being that veteran leadership, especially for a Mark Vientos and a Brett Baty. And I think Justin Turner can come over and do the same exact thing.
Just a quick point on that, Matt. Justin Turner absolutely could be a great piece. And listen, I know a lot of people say in terms of clubhouse culture, I listen to WFAN all the time. I think Salicata, he goes off the rails a little bit, says what he has to say in terms of clicks and whatnot. I've been in the Mets clubhouse before. Pete Alonso is not a cancer. Pete Alonso is not someone that's going to mess up that culture. And I just did want to say that because that is a narrative. You know as well as I do, CP. A lot of people are going to say, oh, Pete Alonso was the reason why, Buck Showalter got fired. That's ridiculous. That's absolutely ridiculous. That's not true. And adding JT would be another great step in building that culture, which I think is already there, if we're going to be honest. It really is. Yep. Francisco Lindor has kind of built that. He's kind of the captain-esque type player. We look to Nimmo, of course, Alonso, but Lindor's the glue guy. He shows up to work every day, does what he has to do, and he builds a culture, which is something that this Mets team has kind of been deprived of for a good amount of time.
Yeah, absolutely. We got some people in the chat saying Stroman to the Yankees is either official or it's in very serious talks. I don't see anything about it being official. Heyman said that they're making progress, and Andy Martino saying that there is serious talks progressing right now. I haven't seen anybody saying that he officially signed
He
though.
just posted a picture of him and the Yankees thing when he was a kid on his story, and then an edit of him as well. But
Right.
again, yeah, I'm sure that could happen. Don't get me wrong, but it's just funny to see. And listen, Marcus Stroman, like I put up a poll, should the Mets be interested in Marcus Stroman? And like so many people said no. And I'm right there with you. I really am, because one, he called out the Mets fans. Certainly, we understand all that.
Yeah.
But in terms of the Yankees, it's a joke because they originally declined him. They originally
Yep.
said, we don't want you on our team. And I guess whatever's happened now is maybe,
Well, and
coming through.
he popped off on them too. He
Right.
popped off on the Yankees and tweeted very negatively about them as well, directly and publicly. So those tweets are probably now deleted, since been deleted. And yeah, Mike Mayer, I guess, is saying the Yankees have signed Marcus Stroman. So
Wow.
we'll wait for the official report in terms of like the mainstream guys like Sherman and Passan, but Mike Mayer breaking that news, I
That's
think, as well.
hilarious,
So
bro. That is
yeah,
absolutely hilarious.
yep, that is pretty funny.
Have fun.
Steven saying Sal sounds like an idiot.
Yeah, listen,
Carlos
I get
agreeing
it.
with
I
you.
get it. I do.
Yeah, absolutely.
You gotta understand their narrative too in radio. You gotta understand that these guys just want your attention. That's all it is. They want you to call in and interact, and they're getting that a lot of the time.
Yep, absolutely. So we got 32 people in the chat right now. Like I said, hit that thumbs up. Definitely appreciate the support. We're going to get into our last segment of the day, and that is buy or sell. Let us know in the chat. Do you guys like this collab with Dan and I? Do you guys like the True Mets Talk live stream? Do you guys want to see more of the True Mets Talk live stream? Let me know in the chat. I do pre-record episodes, but I can start doing live streams as well because it's a lot easier for me and my schedule as well. So I appreciate you again, Dan, for coming on and making this easier and more fun in terms of having somebody to talk to. So let's get into our last segment. It's going to be buy or sell. We're going to run through 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 different slides here, and we're going to make an opinion here and make a decision between ourselves. Are we buying or selling what's on our screen? Do we agree with it? Do we think it's going to happen or not? So first things first, Andy Martino's quote. They have about, quote unquote, on SNY, the Mets Hot Stove Live, they have about $10 million left to spend on this particular offseason. Do you buy that, or are you selling that, Dan?
I'm gonna sell it. I don't think it's true. I really don't. And Martino's great for what he is. He does a good job of investigative reporting. He does his thing. He's probably very intuitive with what's going on with the team. Much more than me and you are. I could tell you that. But again, David Stearns is the guy who I look to in terms of this kind of stuff. And he said there's no budgetary restrictions. There really is not. And, it's something that you got to monitor. It's something you got to be, aware of. But again, the Mets payroll right now is $320 million about. They don't want to surpass over 330 million. I get that. But again, that's a soft cap. That could be 10 million, 15 million. I know numbers have thrown out 17 million. I'm not so worried about that. Steve Cohen has shown that he can spend as much money as anyone else in the league. And this Mets payroll, a lot of people have to realize too, there's $70 million of dead money that they are not using between James McCann, Tomas Nido, Justin Verlander, and Max Scherzer. Okay. So that number is going to be off the books this year. If Justin Verlander, throws less than 140 innings this year, that number will be dead as of 2025. No more dead money going into that year. That's a big thing for the Mets fans. And obviously that's why we look to 2025 as the big year, right? That we can go out and get somebody. So 10 million in terms of spending, maybe, but I'm going to sell that. I really do. I don't think that this team is going to be restricted in that regard. And if they get a DH, it's going to be more than 10 million. I would sure hope so.
Mm-hmm. Yep, absolutely. And I want to sell it so badly. I'm gonna buy it on the premise that Andy Martino is at least in the ballpark, because he did follow up this statement by saying it's a ballpark. It's not a hard cap like you just said. So if I stuck to 10 million, I would definitely sell. But if we're talking about 15, 17, 20, give or take 10, right? On top of that additional 10, then I'll buy it. But anything north of that, I just can't see that coming to fruition. I can't see them going out and realizing they need 3 more guys on the roster and spending collectively $30 to $40 million. So I'll say that 10 is a ballpark and I'll buy it, but I agree with you. Like, it's not a hard cap. Like, this team, David Stearns' front office knows what they need. And if they have a guy that they like on a contract number AAV that they like, they're going to go get him. Absolutely. And then let's see, Ethan saying it's a 2-year deal with the Yankees of Stroman.
Yeah, that's
So
hilarious. Absolutely hilarious.
he doesn't even get a long-term deal. He didn't get a long-term deal. Like, Oh man,
He's gonna be. I don't know what it is that we understand that Rodon and what they're gonna be. Cole. I mean, Cole's gonna be his thing. He's gonna do his thing. He's amazing. But Rodon, Cortez, you can't trust these guys. Stroman, you're gonna throw in the mix now. It's absolutely hilarious.
Yeah, absolutely. All right, next buy or sell. The New York Mets will win more than 75 games in 2024. What are you thinking?
I'm gonna buy this. Absolutely, I'm gonna buy this. I really do think that this team, 75 wins was what they're last year. That's the expectation now looking ahead. So is this team more improved than last year? I do think so. We have Edwin Diaz back, for crying out loud. I mean, I would hope that 75 wins is what we can exceed. And I really do think that that's, not out of the realm of possibility. Again, anything higher than 80, you're going to be looking at the playoffs. I understand that too. But again, 75 wins is not a lot. 75 wins would mean that, the kids are not doing well and these guys are going to be a sell-off. If we're winning 75 games, Chris, we're going to be sellers at the deadline. Okay. So let's hope that that's not the case. I don't think it will be the case. I expect this Mets team to win about 80 to 85 games and hopefully sneak in the playoffs. I really do.
Yeah, I'm right there with you. 80 to 82 is my range right now for the Mets as the roster currently shakes out. And we saw the roster here a couple slides ago. So I'm going to buy this. Everything needed to go wrong in 2023 for the Mets to get to 75 wins and only 75 wins. So I think that this roster in terms of flexibility is in a little bit better shape. I think that if we see a resurgence, obviously huge ifs on Beatty, Marte, guys like that, then we will see more than 75 games being won. And I think that talking Mets with Rob, a guy that I do live streams with, does a great job, has said it basically that the first half of the season up until, the trade deadline is going to be a really wait and see game. If we're on the trajectory of being a mediocre team like last season, we're going to sell off those pieces that we can sell off, like your Sean Manayas, maybe even like your Harrison Baders. Anybody that teams want, the Mets are going to take calls on, just like last season, because they have the flexibility to do so. That's why, partly the reason why they're going after those 1-year deals. Maybe those short-term deals with an opt-out after 1 year if it's a 2-year deal. That's exactly why, because it helps them win, and they can confidently say that this could definitely be a wild card team, but just in case it's not, they can make that decision to flip these guys that they're selling for assets when all that money comes off the books, like you had mentioned just earlier. So give me the over in terms of the roster right now. I think around 80 to 82 games right now. Let's move on. Next one. We're breezing through these. This goes hand in hand from the last slide, right? Are the Mets going to be buyers in 2024 at the MLB trade deadline? Dan, go ahead.
I do think so. I would hope so, I think is the better answer, right? Because I can't sit here and definitively say that that's the case. If you asked me last year, I thought the Mets would have been buyers at the deadline too, and look what happened. So, and to be fair, we didn't really know until about a week until that last year's trade deadline what the Mets were going to do. They had that great stretch where they were rolling through Arizona. Everything looked great. There was a real upside with that Mets team, but they kind of came limping towards the finish line. They threw in the white flag. They traded everyone off. I get all that, and that's great. And I'm happy that they honestly did that. But in terms of this year, I really do think that they'll be buyers. I would certainly hope so, at least. And we got to hope. That's all we can really do. But again, we better be in the position where we can add a couple guys. I don't want to sell off Sean Manaea. I think he's going to have a great year. We saw what he did with Driveline this year. He found out that he had a torso finally, and weighted balls were a thing, and he can finally, throw the ball with consistency and with velocity. So I think these guys are going to unlock a lot of inner, a lot of good stuff on the inside, Luis Severino included. So I would hope that they're buyers, CP. I really do.
Yeah, absolutely. I think they're going to be buyers as well. I'm going to buy on this. And like I said, 80 to 82, maybe even we're lucky, 83, 84 wins is going to put them at that wild card projection. And if you go ahead and are sellers when you're right in the thick of things for the playoff contention, then that's just a very bad look. And I don't think the Mets front office is going to do that. I would understand if they don't do anything and stay pat to see if that materializes for the second half of the season. But I really do think that if they are in a position to make the playoffs in the back end of a wild card spot, because like we said, this team is not going to be division winners, then they will be buyers in some sort of capacity. I'm not saying they're going to go out and get huge names in the offseason that a lot of other teams are going to be looking to pawn off, but they are going to be buyers in some capacity if they aren't in contention. Let's see. Mr. Nobody's saying, if I were Cohen, I would just spend another 110 million just because Martino
That's
said
right.
that. Absolutely.
That's right.
Absolutely.
I wish, Mr. Nobody, believe me.
Yeah, absolutely. Carlos is saying that's what having quality in the farm allows you to do, CP. It's not just about the checkbook anymore. We now have options to acquire players, or we have options to acquire a player or develop them via the farm system. Absolutely, Carlos. I completely agree with where you're going with that. Great point. Buy or sell Edwin Diaz, 30 plus saves, like you mentioned at the top of the show, 32 saves in the last 2 seasons that he's appeared in 2022 and 2021, coming off of an injury. 30 is pretty lofty. Are you buying or selling on 30 plus for Edwin Diaz?
I'm going to buy it. I'm going to buy it. We can't forget his 2018 season with the Mariners, 57 saves. I understand times are different. He's coming off the injury, but he says he's fully healthy 100%, and I trust Edwin Diaz. It just comes down to what the offense is going to be. Can we get him, a 2-run cushion going into the ninth? I would hope. I'd hope he'd be in line for the saves most nights. I really do. But again, 30 saves, I don't think it's out of that realm of possibility. Fangraphs is projecting him to have 35. So I don't really think 30 is out of the realm of possibility. Again, I think it's another question of, I sure hope so. I sure hope he's getting 30 saves for the money that we're paying him and for what we've seen out of him. He had Cy Young votes in 2022. Okay, this guy is someone special. And I think if we get an 8th inning guy in there, if we don't, then maybe 30 is not, feasible, because we don't want him having 6-out saves, 2 nights a week. That's not going to help anyone. So I think 30 saves is definitely something I'm going to buy. CP, absolutely.
Yeah, and I think I want to go the opposite route and sell it, just because not only the injury concern, but are the Mets going to be in enough positions and put him in enough positions to be able to save ball games? And like I said, I don't doubt Edwin Diaz's talent and his ability. We've seen him we've seen him save 50 games with the Mariners, right? And we've seen 30 plus in each of the last 2 seasons he's appeared in, but I just don't know if the Mets are going to put him in enough positions to get those to eclipse 30 plus. So I'm going to sell it. I think it's really close. I'm talking about 27, 28, 29. I don't know if I buy 30 exactly, but I understand where you're coming from. And I would love myself personally if I'm wrong on this one. So I'm going to sell it for now. I think we already got the answer from you, but I'm going to let you give your official answer here. Pitching prospect Mike Vasil makes a start with the Mets before the All-Star break. Personally, I'm going to buy it. Honestly, I'm huge on the prospects this year. If anyone goes down in that rotation, I understand they have a Jose Butto. I understand they have a Tyler McGill waiting at the helms to sort of take over. We know the sort of injury history with Luis Severino, Quintana, etc. I'm going to buy it, though, because I think Mike Vasil, obviously, he needs more seasoning, like you said at the top of the show. But I truly think, obviously, he's the most ready of any of the Mets pitching prospects. And I do think that he's going to get a chance to at least display what he has in spring training. And I think he starts the season off in AAA. But I think that before the All-Star break, if something happens to where the Mets need him and they're, whatever, if they're sick and tired, like we all are seeing Tyler McGill or maybe a Jose Butto who did decent last season, I think that we can see Mike Vasil at least make a start before the All-Star break. So I'll buy this. What about you?
As much as it kills me, I got to sell it. I really do. And it gets to the point where, again, we're banking on injuries, right? I don't want to sit here and say to you, oh, if Mania goes down, if Severino goes down, Peterson's already going down and he'll be back mid-May. That's before the All-Star break. He's going to probably get some reps, probably not in the rotation, but I would assume long relief roles, that Trevor Williams-esque role that we've kind of been depleted of. Adrian Hauser is going to be there all year. Anyone that's played fantasy baseball knows that Adrian Hauser is on the waiver wire most of the time, and he'll be there. He'll be a reliable arm. Jose Quintana is probably not going to get hurt. I would hope Kodai Senga is not going to get hurt. So again, it leaves not many opportunities for Vasil, at least before the All-Star break. And again, we're banking on these guys getting hurt. That's really what it comes down to. And I don't want to be sitting here saying that. I'm going to have to sell this one. Again, will Vasil be up in 2024? Absolutely, he will. He will get his time to shine, no doubt about that. But again, when? I don't know. But
Yep,
definitely not before the All-Star. I don't think so, at least.
Right. Yeah, and like I said, that is a projection. Like I said, I mean, who knows though? I mean, like you said, we don't want to sort of project anybody getting hurt. I don't think the Mets rotation is the surest in terms of the injury history, but
True.
I think he'll be healthy up until the All-Star break. Something just tells me though that he's going to at least make his debut with the Mets, because I don't know how long they can hold him in AAA. They can hold him for as long as they really want to, but at a certain point, the value just starts diminishing and starts deteriorating. I don't know. There's a certain motivation factor there with the players. So I went on a wild card here in terms of buying it, but I completely agree with you.
I could
In a
definitely see it
perfect
though.
scenario for 2024, we should probably sell it, but I'll buy it in this case. And last one here that I have here before we close out the stream. Outfield prospect Drew Gilbert makes his debut with the Mets before the All-Star break. Oh my goodness. I want to say buy. I'm going to sell it, though. I'm going to sell it because they got Bader for a reason. I think they got Bader as that stopgap, one-year type guy. I think that they're going to have a platoon of players with the four-man outfield with Tyrone Taylor, Brandon Nimmo, Starling Marte, and Harrison Bader. I think that if everything holds true, like I said, we're not, sort of anticipating any injuries happening there, although I know that injury history is a concern with 3 of the 4 of those guys. I think that they're going to wait at least till after the All-Star break, maybe sort of closer to the end of the season, if not together next year altogether. So I'm going to sell this. But I will confidently say that I think we see Drew Gilbert up at some point with the Mets in 2024. I think it's just a question of whether it's going to be before or after the All-Star break. I'm going to sell this.
I'm right there with you, CP. I got to sell it too. We got Bader for a reason, as you said, 100%. Like, we're not going to go on the limb and say, okay, if Bader goes down, okay, but we have enough insurance now in the outfield department where Tyrone Taylor can step up, DJ Stewart can step up. God forbid Marte goes down. We have those replacements as well. Drew Gilbert's a special player. And again, he will start in AAA. I'm going to backtrack from what I said before. He is the guy that's starting in AAA. And we can't wait to see him. We really can't. But you got to give these guys time. You really do. It's not everyone's going to be Brett Beatty flying up the ranks. He gets to the big leagues, he's not really doing that well. So, it's tough. It's very, very tough. It's something that I would love to see. I would love to buy this. But again, it's at the point where we are settled for this year. We have Harrison Bader in, who is the best defensive center fielder in baseball, from what he does out there. And it hurts that Brandon Nimmo is probably not going to be our starting center fielder. I get that, but he'll get his reps out there. But again, Drew Gilbert, I just don't see a slot for him at the big league level at this point, pre-All-Star break.
Yeah, and like I said, I dropped a Drew Gilbert video today on the channel, kind of, just going over the report of him starting in AAA, doing a little bit of a deeper dive in terms of his skill set. I do think that he has the ability to be a 5-tool player, complete player, both offensively and defensively. But like I said, I'll say that I won't be shocked if something breaks the wrong way in terms of something happening in the outfield and then Drew Gilbert being that guy to be called up. But I think that if all things remain consistent, and right, we're rooting for Harrison Bader to finally eclipse 100 games. We're rooting for Brandon Nimmo to sort of alleviate that pressure in terms of sliding over to left field and getting a much needed break for his legs, right, when Harrison Bader's out there. We're rooting for Starling Marte to play a bulk workload in 2022. Like you said, maybe closer to 120, 130, because it's just not feasible for him to appear in 150. We're rooting for all those things to happen. But just in any case, I think that Drew Gilbert would be that next guy to be called up. Obviously, you have DJ Stewart on the roster as well. We'll see if the Mets roll with 4 outfielders or 5, but I would have to think that Drew Gilbert would be getting some time at the DH spot. So I think that Drew Gilbert would be your safest option in terms of plugging in at center field behind a Harrison Bader should anything happen there. So that's all we have. I appreciate everyone in the comment section. Patty saying good show. Carlos saying great show. Drew Gilbert, love and abundance. Absolutely. I know, Carlos, you are a Drew Gilbert guy yourself. Ibby, I hated that I had to sell it. I wanted to buy it so bad. You know how big of a Drew Gilbert guy I am. I had to do it. I'm off the train. I'm sorry. I'm going to do better next time. I'm fully rooting for the kid because I think that he's going to be the Mets' center field of the center field of the future, quite blatantly. He's not going anywhere via trade if any trades happen, and I think he's going to be that guy. So, absolutely. Let's see here. Some other comments right here. I think Daniel is checking out the stream. He was a little bit late. Check the replay. You missed some great content. Check the replay. Appreciate you being here now. And yes, they did get Stroman, Daniel. They did get Stroman. They did
Crazy.
get Marcus Stroman. So like I said, that's all we have for today. I appreciate it. Ibby, thank you so much. Make sure you guys checking out Till Mets Do Us Part. They interviewed Terry Collins on their live stream last night. Subscribe to the channel as well. As a great episode, great insight. They always do a great job every Wednesday night on their channel. And thank you all so much for tuning in with us. Dan, this was so much fun, man. We got to do it again. Thank you for coming on the channel. Final words, plug all your work, plug all your stuff as I put in this banner to let people know where you're going to be at.
CP, thank you. Again, I go back to school Monday, so I'll be back at Fordham University in the Bronx. But again, I'm willing to do as much of this stuff as you're willing to have me on. Absolutely, guys. This was a great show. I'm excited for the baseball season too. Tune in ESPN Plus, MSG Network as well. Fordham baseball is coming around the corner. Can't wait. And Mets baseball too. I think it's 43 days, something like that, 45, something like that. So spring training's right around the corner. I'll be at Port St. Lucie for the last game of the season versus the Nationals. Can't wait. And I'll be ready for opening day as well, just as you are. So thank you for having me, CP, and thank you everyone that tuned in tonight.
Absolutely great stuff, man. I know you're a busy man, but we will make this happen again sometime down the
definitely.
line. Like I said, I'm going to be trying to go, go on the live streams more. Any guests are definitely welcome to join me, whether it's on here or with my buddy Amish Country Mets fan Nelson on our Friday streams. Make sure you all are hitting that thumbs up. Hit that thumbs up. Subscribe to the channel. I'm about 4 subscribers away from 400 subscribers. I started this channel. Yeah, exactly. I started this channel back in April, so on my way to 500 subscribers. Hitting that milestone would mean the world to me in terms of
get him there. Get him there. 400 right now. Get him there, and then 500, 1,000, a million. Let's go. Come on.
All the milestones. And you know where to find me, guys, on X and Instagram at CPNYSPORTS. Always great talking to you all. Like I said, if you missed the rest of the show, the first half of the show or the latter half, doesn't matter. Check out the replay. You know where to find us. It's going to be up on the YouTube. Hit that thumbs up. Tell your friends, tell your family to subscribe to the channel if they're Mets fans or MLB fans in general. Dan, thank you so much again. We'll have you on again. Absolutely. This is a great show to do, talking Mets, and we'll come back before the opening day. We'll come back before opening day and give you all a synopsis of what we sort of are gathering between now and opening day. So I definitely appreciate it. Let's go Mets as always, and have a great rest of your Thursday night. Peace.
CP.
Thank you for watching the latest episode of the CP New York Sports Pod. If you enjoyed this content, make sure you hit that thumbs up, comment your thoughts and opinions, and use the lower right-hand button of this video to subscribe to the channel. Thank you.